For Technique of the Week, let's get into butter, shall we? Butter. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal, and I must have been sent this story by at least 5 people. I don't know. Butter. People love butter. And the headline read, "This is better than butter," whether you're cooking steaks or roasting vegetables. And we've talked about this actually many, many times on the show, but I thought it'd be nice to get back into butter and explain what people refer to as culinary gold. It's something often referred to as ghee or clarified butter. Small differences depending on, ghee comes from India, and their process, I think, is really one of the best for clarified butter. It gets a little extra nuttiness. So what ends up happening is you cook out certain parts of the butter and then you sieve them out. So you cook it down, separate it, and sieve them out. And in that process, you end up having something that is just pure butter fat. You don't have the milk solids, you don't have those things, and that will be part of our discussion today. But I thought instead of just focusing on ghee or clarified butter, I'd go through all the different types of butter. So I'll get into this and I'll explain how to make it coming up in a moment. But let's start with the basics. Unsalted butter. Often you'll see it labeled sweet cream butter. Same. And super versatile. It's used a lot in cooking and baking. The reason why it is used often in cooking and baking, so that the person baking or cooking can control the level of salt. In baking, I understand there's a lot of control there. I've always thought this notion was silly. You're talking about like a quarter teaspoon of salt. That's what's in a stick of butter. I think a lot of this, I've read article after article after article, that some people, that there was kind of a conversion problem when some of the old recipes were kind of brought into modern day. But for whatever reason, people swear by this. And that's because different makers might put different amounts of salt in it. And I get all of that. But if you're using the same brand from the same location all the time, I think you know how to compensate. There's salt in all kinds of things. There's salt in cheese. So I always thought it was a little, I hear people swearing by it all the time, and bakers will probably come at me, but they're the pros, I'm not. But I always thought that it's just one of those weird culinary things get passed down. So I have both here, and really unsalted is used for cooking and baking for the most part, and then salted butter is used as a spread when you're putting it on top of something like a piece of great bread, or even if you're topping off, I don't know, rice or something, I will use it. Salted butter is exactly like sweet cream butter. It just has that quarter teaspoon of salt in it. That's the reality. So those are the type of things that you have the most in the house. Those are probably what you have most. You could do one or the other. If you have unsalted, you just put a little salt on it. I had some wonderful, wonderful butter the other day and some bread, and the way it was served is with this gorgeous chunk of butter and with a side of salt, like finishing salt. Beautiful. And you could literally take that, put it onto your bread, and then sprinkle a little salt on it if you wish. Not a problem. Easy peasy. So let's get into the clarified butter part. This is what people refer to as culinary gold, and I'll tell you why. So the milk fat is rendered from the butter, and you separate the milk solids and the water from the butter fat. So you're cooking it at a low temperature, And as you're cooking it, when you put butter in a pan, you know how it bubbles and kind of sizzles a little bit? Well, the reason that is that the fat is starting to heat up. And what doesn't mix? Oil and water. So when you melt the butter down from a solid, the water in there starts to evaporate because the oil is heating up. That's why things make noise when you deep fry them. And that's why you don't want to put a frozen turkey, deep fry a frozen turkey for people who have done that. I have not, but I've seen the pictures. Because oil and water don't mix. They have even less good times when the oil is hot. So that part of sizzling, once it starts to stop sizzling, then the water's gone. It's evaporated. Next, you're going to see these little bits of the milk fat start separating, and that's the process. Then you take it and you put it through a sieve and a cheesecloth that will catch all that milk fat, and what you'll have is clarified butter. No water in it, and the milk solids removed. What does that do? Well, it gives it a nutty flavor because that milk fat in the process of rendering starts to caramelize and get that nutty flavor to it, which is wonderful. But really what it does is it changes the smoke point. Smoke point is important in oils and fats because that means the smoke point is when they start to break down. That's when they lose some of their properties. That's when they start to get nasty smelling and things like that, and end up bringing a foul odor and taste to something rather than the loveliness that they're supposed to. Butter comes in at about 325, 375. That's when it starts to break down. That's when it starts to smoke really heavily. And that's why sauteing in butter, usually you'll cut it with some olive oil or something like that. The olive oil has a higher smoke point, kind of takes care of that and buffers the butter. But what you can do is saute. When you're doing steaks, if you're going to sear them off, you're roasting vegetables, you can use clarified butter or ghee, and that'll boost that smoke point up to around 485. So you get about 100-degree higher heat out of clarified butter that doesn't have that milk fat. Also, a lot of it has the lactose, the casein, that is the lactose, and all of that kind of wicked out. And so those that are intolerant or have a milk allergy usually can handle clarified butter even better. So you melt that butter, allow the things to separate, water evaporates, solids float to the surface, you skim them off, put them through a sieve and a cheesecloth, and what's left over is this beautiful pure butter fat with a higher smoke point, still has great flavor of butter, has a little nuttiness, great on popcorn, all of these things. It's a great thing to do. But every once in a while, everybody starts praising it again, and it's been around forever. And I know that we have people that don't eat animal products of any kind, and we respect them. We respect everybody in their dietary limitations or dietary needs or dietary beliefs. It's all welcome. But I will tell you that I am not somebody who will demonize something over something else, because I just hate that. I think it causes problems with eating. I think it causes disorders. I think it causes all kinds of problems. We have learned over the years that animal fats are good. They can be nutritious and they can be valuable in cooking. We've also learned that when we've tried to mess with fats, and margarine and things like that growing up was very popular with us, that it didn't have the benefits that once were thought and actually caused some problems. So I will say that I absolutely use animal fats. I eat animals too. So it doesn't go against the way I live, but I want to recognize that out of respect to those that might have issues with it. Moving on from clarified butter to organic butter, comes from cattle raised without antibiotics, which really, the way we've moved through farming and having to use things like antibiotic, antibiotics and growth hormones and all those things, I'm equally as down upon as I am for proper raising and the proper care of these animals. I know that might seem contradictory to some, but I just tell you, the antibiotics in there, the growth hormones, all that stuff is more garbage than we need. So organic butter is raised without those things, antibiotics, growth hormones. They're given 100% organic feed, grown without toxic pesticides, synthetic fertilizer, all of that. And you can find it in unsalted and salted, and you use it just like conventional butter. Whipped butter. This has air or other gas, like nitrogen, and it's added to make it less dense than standard butter. So kind of a little goes a long way. This increased volume is, less calories per tablespoon. It could even be half. And it's got a lighter texture, but just keep in mind it's got less calories because it's got more air in it. Best for spreading on toast, finishing dishes. It's not recommended for baking or cooking at all. It's just a spread. It's just a spread, easier to spread because it's got the air in it and it's lighter and whipped and all that. European style butter, which a lot of people love, I do too. This is, why French croissants are so lovely and airy and delicious. It's got extra milk fat. 82 to 85% for most brands. So your European style butter has less moisture. It's got less of that water in there than standard butter. And it's got all that milk fat in it. So this is like the opposite of clarified butter. Makes pastries tender, fluffy cakes. It's made with fermented or cultured cream. So it has a little bit of tang to it. And it could be used for any sort of cooking task. Spreadable butter is regular butter and some vegetable oil added in, so it spreads easier. Not recommended for baking or cooking again. Light butter, it has less than 40% or less of milk fat. Not recommended for baking or cooking also. Butter-like spread, keep that in mind. Not recommended for baking or cooking either. It's just like a buttery flavored spread. So that's the basic breakdown of your butters to use. But enjoy. Just butter is one of those wonderful, wonderful things in the world. All right, we'll be back with more, so go nowhere. It is The Fork Report. I'm Neil Saavedra, KFI AM 640.